Hey everybody, it's Rebecca here. For those of you who don't know, I'm the founder of HR Uprise. I am here with today's Spotlight Call, this month's Spotlight Call. And today we are going to talk all about code of conduct. Now, I promise you, this is not going to put you to sleep. This is the kind of stuff that, usually people roll their eyes and go, oh, that's typical HR. But, and Okay, I will admit there is a little piece of it that might be some of that boring HR stuff. However, I'm going to talk to you today about why you should care about it. And what do you need for a really good code of conduct that first and foremost will protect your employees, because of course that is the most important thing. But second of all, will also protect your organization. So let's jump into it. And at the end, I will share some notes. So if you are looking for notes on the stuff that we're talking about today, you should be able to download those right below where you are watching this video. So first and foremost, let's talk about what is a code of conduct. It is a document that you have, you can call it a policy as well, but it essentially establishes your company's norms for behavior. And most importantly, this is the part I really want you to remember, it establishes the expectations that your employees have of you, that you have of your employees, and that we all as coworkers have together. A well-written code of conduct will also explain your company's mission and values and how they relate to those behavioral expectations that you have. So that is what a code of conduct is. Let's jump into what you need to make sure that you have a really good code of conduct. First and foremost, use clear and concise language. Don't use technical jargon. Don't use language that is from your industry or acronyms from your industry. It should be clear to anybody working inside or outside of your organization what those expectations for behavior are. So you want to use language that sounds like you wrote it, not an attorney. Sorry to our attorney friends, but you want to make sure that it's just plain language that makes sense to anybody who would read it, whether they're from your industry or not. Okay, second, make it highly visible, easily accessible, and public. So what I mean by this is share your code of conduct. This should be something that is really easy for people to refer back to, that if your vendors or your customers, your clients, anybody wanted to see it, of course, in addition to your employees, that they would have easy access to it. So include your code of conduct on your website, have it posted if you have a physical location, have it on your company intranet. Make sure that it is easy and invisible, or easily visible, there we go. It makes enforcement of it easier as well if it's really easy to find, if it's something that you share readily. Don't assume that everybody will automatically understand your code of conduct either. So make sure you're providing training to employees to make sure that standards are clear and their questions can be answered. I have found that a scenario-based training, so a what if this were to happen, how would we handle it, kind of training is particularly useful and really helps solidify, again, those expectations that we have for each other. It's really, really helpful to train your employees with that what if scenario. Okay, and we can talk about the training at another time. All right, next, specify a reporting process for complaints. So you should have a really, really clear process for your employees or third parties to report any concerns that they have, and you do not have to make this complicated. Now, there are some software, there's software out there that will help you help your employees report things anonymously. And we have a really great relationship with Spot. So we strongly recommend we in fact use them at HR Uprise as well. They can report to you, tell you things that might be difficult for them to say face to face. And I definitely recommend having an anonymous reporting process in addition to having people come and report directly to you as a manager or their supervisor or whatever your reporting relationship is within your organization. Okay, so one of the top reasons people don't report misconduct is the fear of retaliation. So this is especially true if this misconduct is happening with somebody who's in a position of power or authority within your organization. So again, to combat this, you want to make sure your reporting process includes an option for people to report concerns anonymously. And it should include an option for an independent party to conduct the investigation as well. So that's something that we do at HR Uprise. Again, you can reach out to us and let us know if you need some help with an investigation, especially one that might be particularly sticky, or if you have a high-ranking person within your organization who's accused of misconduct, or they may just be involved in some way. There are lots of reasons that people bring us in, but we can also help with independent investigations. Okay, so back to our code of conduct. Next, support from your leadership needs to be clear. So this is something that I talk to leaders about really frequently. And that is number one, as a leader for an organization, especially if you're the founder, the owner, or the executive director within your organization, you absolutely need to reinforce and be a model of the code of conduct that you're setting out for your employees. So not only do the rules absolutely apply to you, the standard for you and your behavior needs to be even higher. Okay. So I know that sounds like something, it may sound like something to you that I shouldn't have to say, but I will tell you this is something I talk to leaders about really frequently. That what can happen within an organization is you establish a set of rules for your employees, and then the managers or founders or owners of the organization feel like they have a separate set of behaviors that are acceptable for them. Let me tell you, whatever you have, you may have the best code of conduct written, but if it's written one way and you see founders or owners or leaders acting another way, whatever that behavior is that you're seeing on the other side, however they're acting, that's your code of conduct. That is what is now the acceptable behavior within the organization. So please understand, as a leader, support from leadership for your code of conduct needs to be absolute, and it should be really clear. So they need to see that in your actions, not just your words. They need to hear directly from you that the code of conduct is important and that you will enforce it. So next, let's talk about one more thing. Your code of conduct should be written for more than just legal compliance. Okay, so of course, you should not accept illegal behavior. That's straightforward, right? But just setting the standard for behavior at what's legal and what's not is not enough. Okay, the bar for the legal definitions of harassment and discrimination are incredible. That bar is incredibly high. So there are many examples of behavior that's unacceptable, but not necessarily illegal, right? So make sure that you are going above and beyond just what's considered illegal behavior to the letter of the law. You really need to have higher standards. Ultimately, what I'm saying is you got to have higher standards than just the legal definition. Okay, so here's some recommendations. Let's talk about scope. Your code of conduct should imply, now think about who is it applying to? Okay, so it needs to apply to employees, of course, but also think about vendors, your customers, clients, and anybody who's on company property, whether they're on company time, at company sponsored events, right? So it needs to apply to everyone. And some interactions may not rise to the level of harassment, again, legal definition, but it still communicates bias. It can perpetuate stereotypes or emphasize stereotypes. Okay, so these issues can be just as problematic because they create an awkwardness or may make an employee feel uncomfortable at work. So think about whether a vendor is making inappropriate comments to one of your employees. Okay, so your code of conduct should address these issues and cover what happens outside the workplace as well. So if you're at a company function, your code of conduct still applies. Okay, so examples of situations that should be covered in the scope. So think about employees interacting with each other, employees interacting with managers, employees interacting with customers, and customers interacting with each other. Okay, so what is the standard that we accept? And I will say this, you probably have heard me say this before. If not, write it down. Your company culture is defined by the worst behavior you are willing to tolerate. I'll say it again. Your company culture will be defined by the worst behavior you're willing to tolerate. All right. So now let's talk about values. The best codes of conduct, I should say, include a clear statement of the company's values, right? So your company's values are the beliefs, your philosophies, your principles that drive your business. Why did you go into business in the first place, right? They impact the employee experience that you deliver, as well as the relationship you develop with your customers, partners, shareholders, etc. Your company values really should include a commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion as well. So let me know, but we have it'll walk you through the whole process to create your company values if you don't already have it. Okay, last part. Well, I think it might be the last. Next part, how about we say that? Next part, expected behaviors. So be really explicit about how you expect your employees to engage with each other and work towards your goals. So for example, here's an example. We are dedicated to providing a harassment-free experience for everyone, regardless of gender, sexual orientation, disability, physical appearance, body size, race, or religion. We do not tolerate harassment of employees, customers, or vendors in any form. So that's one example. All right, so talk about your unacceptable behaviors. Company culture, as I said, is defined by the worst behavior you're willing to tolerate. So you need to be really clear about what you expect and be really explicit about the behaviors you will not tolerate. Okay, so here's some examples of what I'm talking about. I'm talking about belittling someone or using subtle expressions of bias. Of course, verbal, physical, or written abuse or assault, bullying, intimidation, or victimization, discrimination, inappropriate use of company property or assets, right? Failure to comply with company values, of course, illegal activity, and then harassment. So there are lots and lots of descriptions and lots of different ways that harassment could show up in the workplace. Keep in mind, power dynamics are a really, really important component of a code of conduct. So it's unrealistic to expect that people aren't going to develop relationships at work, sometimes even intimate relationships. I know tons of people who have met their long-term partner at work, okay? But keep in mind, these can also create specific issues at work. So keep in mind as you're developing your process, power dynamics, especially in a boss-subordinate relationship, have significant impacts on the work environment. So an intimate relationship with power dynamics involved can also blur the lines of consensuality. So creating the appearance of favoritism can also have a really negative impact. So having clear expectations outlined in your code of conduct can also help alleviate some of these negative impacts. So here are a couple of examples of how some companies have chosen to deal with this. Some companies opt for a no dating policy for people who are in a boss and subordinate relationship. I've also seen no dating policies for people who both report to the same boss. Okay, and so when it comes up, if people have started dating, they would tell the organization, then they would move one of the people to a different team so that those reporting relationships don't exist anymore. Other companies I've seen have, like, they would call it a one-shot rule, where an employee can ask another employee out once, but if they say no, they're not allowed to ask again. And the reason for that is it prevents harassment. It prevents somebody from continuing to ask over and over again when the other person has made it clear they're not interested. Okay, so those are just some examples of how you might decide to handle that within your organization. So let's talk about violations of code of conduct. And again, it is super important to be very clear about what the consequences may be if somebody violates your code of conduct. So it could be a written warning, a suspension, termination, or other consequences. So let's go back to an example of the relationship policy. So here's an example. If you're approached as having consciously or, oh, wait, I'm sorry, this is not about the relationships. This is an example for if somebody has made a comment or made another person feel uncomfortable. Okay, so sorry about that. So here's the example language that you could include in your code of conduct. If you're approached as having consciously or unconsciously acted in a way that might make your teammates feel unwelcome, listen with an open mind and avoid becoming defensive. Remember that if somebody offers you feedback, it likely took a great deal of courage for them to do so. The best way to respect that courage is to acknowledge your mistake, apologize, and move on with a renewed commitment to do better. That said, repeated or severe violations of this code can and will be addressed by our leadership and can lead to disciplinary actions, including termination. Okay, so that's one example. All right, so last, mentioned before, having a way for people to report code of conduct. So again, make sure you're very clear about how employees should report violations of the code of conduct, including an option for anonymous reporting and independent investigations. So create transparency by either posting flyers in your workplace, sending out regular emails, reminding employees in team meetings, and posting in other places, whether it's in a physical location for you or electronic or both. But you want to reinforce your support for the anonymous reporting and your independent process. All right, so those are my tips and tricks, my strategies for creating a really good code of conduct. Ultimately, what you want to have is, of course, a workplace where everybody feels like they can bring their best self to work. That is ultimately what you're trying to create. And again, you have to be able to define the behaviors that you are willing and not willing to tolerate so that you can create the best company culture. If you have questions, let us know how we can help and what questions you might have. And thank you so much for joining me.